Hello. Good afternoon from Vienna. Good day to wherever you are in the world. Hope everybody's having a lovely day today. Let me get rid of that lo-fi music for us. Yes, this time I remembered right at the start. Yeah. Welcome to the May edition of the Suborbital Community Meetup. Wonderful to have you all here. Thank you all so much for joining. And any questions that you have during this event, please feel free to put them into the chat on YouTube or on Discord, and we will be very happy to highlight them / put them up and read them out. And one thing of note before we get started is Discord audio. So we are streaming directly to Discord. If you find that the volume is kind of low for you, please feel free to right-click on the live stream of Discord and raise the stream audio. Very important. It is possible to do it on mobile as well. I think you have to long press on the user, or no, there's a burger menu at the top right on your device, from what I remember. Yes. We've got some hellos already. I'm gonna go ahead and say hello to Jagger. Thank you very much. Good to see you here. All right, let's get into enough of my messing around. Let's get into what we're going to be covering today, and got some exciting advancements coming your way. First up, we're going to have Laura, who's going to be giving us a bit of an update on Subo itself, which comes with WAT support, and show us a little bit of what she's been doing with writing WebAssembly by hand with WAT. Which is a fun name. I never get tired of it. And then we've got Flocky from Suborbital as well, coming over to show us a little bit of a sneak preview of a project he's been working on called, and this little talk is called Building Your Own Twitter to Mastodon Cross Poster. So be sure to stick around for that, and please send us those questions. We got WAT excitement here. Love it. All right. Well, with that said, let's not mess around any further and bring on Laura. So I'll just bring you on. Hey, Laura, how are you?
Hey, Ron, how's it going?
All good here. How are you?
Doing well, thanks.
Excellent. Well, I'm super excited to see what you've got in store for us. I'll be hopping off into the background, and I'll bring your slides. There we go. And it's all you. Thanks again, Laura.
Great. Yeah, so we have now with the new release of Subo, we have support for WAT. And so one of the things that we can do with that is we can write WASM by hand using SAT. So we might be wondering, why would I do that? because WebAssembly isn't meant to be written by hand by most users, but there are a few circumstances under which writing WebAssembly code by hand actually can make sense. So maybe you're writing WASM to run on a microcontroller. So even the inherent super small nature of WASM modules produced by standard compilers might not be quite small enough. And so then maybe we need something that gets even teenier. And one of the ways that we can do that is by writing the WASM code by hand. Potentially, you might be writing a compiler that actually targets WebAssembly itself. Or maybe you just really are into writing assembly code from scratch occasionally to understand it really deeply. So say, okay, now you're convinced. How do I get started? We have an app for that. We have SAT for that. So you can check out our new post with everything you need to get started to learn how to write WASM by hand using SAT and our Subo CLI. And we have a new blog post up here at blog.suborbital.dev, and we'll have a link to the post itself. And we've got a little preview here of what the handwritten WASM code looks like. And that is it for me. Thanks, Ramon.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Laura. Super exciting stuff. And I have to admit, I haven't written any WAT yet myself. Maybe something we should do in one of our live streams soon. I think it'd be fun. And
Yeah.
yeah, is there, if we want to learn a little bit more about that sort of thing, is there any shows or live streams that you'd like to give a shout out to?
For writing WASM by hand?
Or what we're up to with Subo
Oh,
and but yeah, writing with yeah.
So we have
Sorry to put you on the
we've
spot.
done not specifically with Subo, but we have had, I don't have links handy, but we have done some streams recently writing, you and I are writing our first WASM app in Rust and compiling to JavaScript on the front end. And we've had our new Explain Like I'm Five series, featuring our first episode featuring our director of engineering, Oscar Spencer, talking about, so what exactly is WebAssembly, which is probably not news to anybody joining our community call this morning. But we love bringing new people into the WebAssembly and the suborbital communities. So check those out.
Sending links as I go here. Yeah, no, super cool stuff. I'm very excited to see the next Explain Like I'm Five episode. Yeah, awesome. Thanks a lot, Laura.
Thanks, Ramon.
All right, so let's move to the next one. So I'm about to bring on Flocky, one of our DevX engineers here. So here we go. Hey, Flocky. I hope this is. I hope everything's going well on your end.
Yeah, all is good. Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you fine. I can hear you
All
fine.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully, I've been running into
Well,
some live demo issues, so we'll see how it goes, and
I'm.
if
Yeah.
we might need to. Yeah. It's just a general like live demo things and when your token expires. But I'm happy to let me see if this is beautiful.
I'm happy to lay down some of the groundwork if you need some time, Flaky, and
Yeah,
tell us a little bit about.
let's yeah, I'm worried because I'm having an access token issue, which I would be gladly solving on stream if it wasn't about showing the access token itself, which is not an ideal situation, as you might imagine. So,
All
and
fine.
without that, yeah.
I'm happy to go a little, if I may.
Oh
Walk
yeah,
through
you're
a
more.
little.
we have time.
Yeah, because this project started, when there were when there were lots of folks. There was a renewed interest in Mastodon, and so we were, thinking about, what could we, how to have a how to have a presence, not just not as suborbital per se, but like as people on Mastodon and Twitter at the same time. And so the idea came up of having a cross poster that, when you, and correct me if I'm wrong, but when you send tweets to Twitter, they'll cross post automatically on your Mastodon. Is it account? Instance of
Yeah, I
account.
mean, well, I mean, you have a account. Like the funny thing about Mastodon is that they actually have uh like they have both things. Like Twitter has a single instance in practicality, right? So Twitter only knows about twitter.com. That's the only thing that exists. And so the kind of like Mastodon kind of throws this idea into like the ecosystem, that you can have multiple twitter.coms, and like whatever the account on that account you have can be like there's like a huge thing about like people squatting on like Twitter usernames, and the user stuff. And like you can have your own server, and you can have your own whatever usernames that you would like, and they would just be fine. And so this is kind of the thing. So when you have to deal with both of those things actually, where you will have to choose an instance, and like you have to register an account on that instance. And after that is done, you're basically able to like interact with that account. The interesting thing is that those instances and like everything is connected. So
Mm,
basically, um, like even though you are not on, like imagine if twitter.com and mytwitter.com existed, and you could have your own accounts and do anything. And like, but you could also talk to people from mytwitter.com to twitter.com. And so basically this is what the federation means. In like when Mastodon people say that it's a federated social network, is that like these servers can actually interoperate and talk to each other.
awesome. Yeah, thank you. And I'm curious. The project came sort of like, from a love for, trying out these technologies and seeing how they could be applied to using our. do- I only learned, I think it was on Tuesday, that I finally asked, like, what is dog fooding? And I guess this is what it kind of applies to, right?
Yeah, it's
Like trying
yeah,
out.
I don't know,
Yeah.
like you would have to look up the etymology, but like I think like dog fooding is like kind of a derivative of like eating your own dog food, which probably is a bit more, like self-explanatory of like what happens in there. But yeah, I would yeah, but it's basically like trying out our own system, and like feeling how it works to kind of improve like the developer experience, like even further. Like whenever we like ask people to send us feedback, ask people to send us questions, or like when we help people, and for example in the help channel Discord, it's all very useful that like it kind of gives us a perspective
Mm,
into somebody's like unique use case, or unique like user use case of the of Suborbital. And like, but like that cannot like basically like we can extend that by using Suborbital ourselves and trying to kind of push it beyond like the boundaries. And so that's sort of like what happens here. I was like, hey, like Suborbital seems like a good choice for like kind of trying to pull API requests together, and figure out how to like build an application like that that kind of interacts with multiple systems and like able to pull this thing together. I was not able, like, despite my best attempts, I couldn't get this to pass. So I can still demo the application and showcase it, and
Sure.
we're just not gonna. I guess it's a prototype after all. I can talk a bit about like where we want to head with it, but I can also like show some of the code just to show how this looks like when it actually when Twitter is not throwing. I might actually. I'm thinking. I'm wondering if actually like something around the Twitter API is wrong because it tried 4 different like API keys and none of those worked. So
Oh dear.
I'm
Yeah,
kind of
Twitter and API keys,
out of
right?
ideas. Yeah, yeah, Twitter has went through like a new like API release. Like they released a new V2 API, and that's been a bit flaky recently. Not to be confused with Flocky.
I was just gonna say a good
But like,
play for Flaky. Sorry, carry on.
yeah. No, yeah, but like, yeah, I can show the code
Yeah.
be sure, yeah, people can be sure that this is going to be open sourced, and
Wonderful.
so they are gonna get to play with it like eventually when it's all fixed up and the Twitter API is not giving us like 401 errors.
Cool. Cool to show your screen then. I
Yeah,
see you've got it here.
good to go. Yes.
Alrighty, here we go. I'll leave you to it, Flaky. I'll be here. And folks, my subtle banner returns. See you all
Yeah,
in a bit.
please, by all means, yeah, ask questions and give some comments. I'm gonna zoom in a little bit, so I'm gonna close that one down just to be sure. So here, what you see here is a single suborbital runnable. What is going to be interesting and is a future step in this building this application is actually pulling this apart into separate runnables. So those runnables would run sequentially, and then like individually those runnables could be reused. So just as a reminder, like this is a suborbital project, a suborbital project that uses Atmo to create a server that runs like in the background. Like think of it as like a permanent service. And so like you can use the subo tool if you go into your documentation and just subo create a new project by subo create project, and then subo create runnable to create a new runnable. You pass subo create runnable. I think we have a help here. You runnable dash help. I'm going to zoom in here as well. So you can pass the name of the runnable, which is in here. It's pull. So this is the runnable folder that is going to get created, and you have to pass like which language you would like the runnable to be created. You can see the languages on the documentation, the active languages that are supported. This code has been built in JavaScript using our Java runtime. We actually had a couple weeks ago, we had a introduction into how Java and JavaScript on WebAssembly works. It's quite fascinating if you missed it, how we compile an entire JavaScript engine into WebAssembly and run your JavaScript code inside WebAssembly. But it's a really capable engine, and so if you pass --lang space JavaScript, Subo will use its templates and create a new suborbital JavaScript template that you will be able to see here. And in the SRC, you can see a couple of files. There's a index.js file that is going to be like just adding some boilerplate. You don't really have to worry about that. But a lib.js file is going to be created where you put your actual runnable code. And So what you would want to be using here is on the documentation. If you open the Atmo documentation, you can see a option for the runnable API. And these are all the superpowers, we kind of call them, that Atmo makes available to you. So normally your WebAssembly module doesn't have access to anything in the outside world. So anything, be that network access or the machine that it's running on, be that environment variables or the machine or the running application, so even the file system is locked away. This is what we call WebAssembly running in a sandbox. So when this happens, this is very useful to make sure that your application is not becoming like a security vector. But the problem is that your application is also not very useful because it cannot interact with the outside world. So we give your application APIs that you could enable for a per application basis. There is like ways to tell which APIs could be used or not. This is not really relevant because we are building this application for ourselves. So all our code we are going to be running is going to be built by ourselves. We are not really worried about like anything bad happening here. But for example, if we were to release this application open source and like you would want to run this application in your own like Atmo installation, you might actually consider, or like just some of the Vaso modules that we build, you might actually consider locking down your application and the access to these APIs. A prime interface that we are going to be using in this app is the HTTP client interface. This HTTP client interface is like basically what makes possible to do this application. Basically, how the application works is we reach out to Twitter, we check out which the latest tweets on an account, and once that happens, we actually going to pull in like those tweets one by one, and going to use a second HTTP client request, this time to Mastodon, and access the Mastodon instance of our choice and use the credentials of the account of our choice to cross-post these messages onto that account. So how this looks like in code. Basically, there's some configuration that we import from a local config file. I can show an example of this. Is basically a lot of these API calls you could just do with any like client like curl or like any HTTP request compatible client. So basically, most of these APIs use a bearer token, which identifies you towards the Twitter API, and then an API requests with some data that in the query that describes what is the API that you are trying to reach. So for this application, we are going to need a Twitter token. As mentioned, you will need to sign up in the developer portal of Twitter for a new API key. So here, developer.twitter.com, you just go and grab yourself like one of these application accesses. Since the V2 release, like this should be pretty straightforward, and you should be able to get like a API key fairly easily. Once you got the Twitter token, you have to use this Twitter here. Here we also save the Twitter ID of the account that we're trying to reach. Twitter has unique IDs for these accounts, so you have to figure this out. Currently, you could totally pull this from the API. That's like a future enhancement that we could which you could just specify a username like Suborbital dev, and like it would just pull the appropriate ID. So you don't necessarily need this, but this is basically the source account. This is the account that the tweets of which we want to replicate in our Suborbital app. And similarly for the other side, for the Mastodon host, Here, it's interesting because, or important that you need to define which host actually you want to be interacting. Again, all Mastodon instances have their own accounts. So even if you register an account and like have a access token, you will need to specify which instance it belongs to. And so later we are going to be sending messages to this account using this URL. And now we just have to draw the rest of the YAML. After we imported this configuration, basically we use the run function, which is the function that gets called by the suborbital runtime when a function gets executed. I'll talk in a bit later about like when that happens, when do our function gets executed. But like basically what you need to do is use. Oh yeah, here we actually do some caching between the application runs, and to make sure that we basically one run of this function only tweets one tweet. But then we need to keep a track of, what was the last tweet that we actually tweeted, right? So whenever this function gets called, we want to tweet the next tweet. So for this, we actually need to cache some data. So the cache API is another API that we provide here that you could use for accessing the cache. That you could use for storing data between runs of functions and actually between the runs of these like executed functions. There are other ways to store some data between runs of these functions. If you are chaining these functions together, you could use the state, or if you want more persistent storage because the cache actually gets deleted when you shut down the Atmo application, you could use the SQL databases. Like you could use a connection and like save these into something like a Postgres database. But here we just went to like the easiest way to like get close like runtime collaboration. And basically, we always save the ID of the tweet that we sent already to Mastodon the last time, and that's all that we need to know to be able to. So here we query that the tweets from the Twitter account, and here we do some mangling on the JSON file, and basically we log some information here like about the received request, and we tweet and we find the tweet that we need to tweet next. It may happen that like we have tweeted all the recent tweets, so if there is no tweet, like we just stop the function, will stop from tweeting. But if we do have a tweet to cross post, comes the interesting portion where we actually you see a couple of things here: tweet decode amps, tweet expand links, tweet replace user tags. Basically, we just take the original Twitter like tweet text and pass it through a bunch of filters here. I'll show you these filters later and like explain a bit more about them. Why Suborbital and like running these things in WebAssembly might be really interesting here. But like just to finish this up, like there is another API as I mentioned. We need to use the Mastodon host that we configured to access the API. Again, we have an access token. And basically just need to access the statuses statuses API endpoint and encode the text of the new message. And so here's some more error handling of sending that tweet. And here you see that the last thing is basically setting the in the cache. We just set the cache to ensure that our tweet ID is saved. So the next time we tweet the next tweet, and we just return some information about the URL that we just tweeted and which tweet it actually comes from. So that's it in a nutshell. Some more words about these functions and some more words about like why does this make so much sense in WebAssembly, and what helps here in WebAssembly. First, these like filter functions. So the weird you might have asked yourself the question, why did they just not use like an off the shelf cross poster? And the interesting things is that using this method of like building our own cross poster, and you could have seen it, like there's a bunch of error handling, but like this is basic and logging, but this is like 100 lines code JavaScript. So like this is really not more than like a couple API calls. So it was pretty straightforward to do, but it gives us immense flexibility in calling these filter functions. So if you look into these filter functions, Twitter for some reason encodes the end character, the add character, into its HTML entity representation. Don't ask me why it does it. I haven't actually looked deep into it, but like we were like, okay, like Mastodon doesn't like that, so we just like convert that back. The rest of the tweet is not HTML, so it's interesting. It's baffling. What we basically do is we pass in the original tweet text, we replace some text in it, and we give it back. And so as you can see it, we just basically run this in sequence. And we have another thing, which we pass in the JSON that we receive from the API. And so if you have look at the like Twitter suborbital dev, I'm not sure if you're going to be seeing it, but like you probably know this. Like you can see discord.com/invite/ and the full link here. But if you actually look in the corner of the screen, you will see that it's actually a t.co short link. Now, we definitely don't want t.co short links in our Mastodon application. So Twitter API actually gives us back like in the API response, like the mapping of the t.co URLs that show up in the tweet body and the expanded version of those like URLs. So we can just pull the original t.co links and replace them with the version that actually applies here. And like if that wasn't enough, we have a third filter where we actually have a dictionary. And so again, this is just a thrown together thing. Like you can do this much nicer. Like Twitter actually gives you back the tagged users as well in the API response. So there are many better ways to do this. But like Portman's way of like doing translation is we literally just have a dictionary here in our application that says, hey, if the Twitter mention of whole soy milk will have to be adjusted because of this peculiarity that I mentioned about instances in Mastodon. So Ramon, my fair colleague here, has a Mastodon account on mastodon.online. This instance and Laura has a different instance on Indie Web Social and a different username. So we basically just map these usernames from the original ones to their Mastodon equivalents. This means that when the tweets got cross-posted from our Mastodon account, they actually tag the right people, at least as far as it goes for our team members. You can see a bunch of to-do messages here, like append at twitter.com to the ones that we actually can't resolve, like using this dictionary. But like this flexibility is what makes building your own cross poster an actually useful idea, because you can basically customize it and fit your own application. Like Suborbital is kind to help people to do this all over the place. Like be that building Suborbital like services into your application or using Atmo in conjunction with your applications. Building like an API server to like kind of expand on your existing application functionality, or like a single page app on that you built. And so this kind of meshes really well, this enabling customizability and enabling this customization. for all sorts of use cases. More interestingly, though, so here these are just JavaScript functions. Imagine, and this is a next step for a future version of this application, if these were the runnables of their own. And so this is where I need to pull up the directive.yaml file. Again, like if you go into the documentation, you will see in the concepts section like an explanation of what runnables and the directive are. But the directive is basically what pulls together like the individual functions in our repo into a whole application or a whole API server or whatever you are building here. And so what you are going to be seeing, like we have a handler. And so this handler actually is a request, a get request to the pull function, which is what we've just been talking about. And it has a steps, which means that a handler can execute multiple steps. So call multiple functions. So in the current case, the only thing this handler does is actually pull the tweets and tweet them out. But if we separate this function to a one that pulls the next tweet and one that just sends it to Mastodon, what we could do in between those, we can change the output of the Twitter function before it reaches the Mastodon function. So if this was here, a function to pull tweet, and there was another function of send tweet, in between the two, you could insert additional. Obviously, like you would have to align those two endpoints, but like in between, you can insert a new function that says function my map usernames, and use your own username. So whatever mapping or whatever transformation you would like to transform the original tweet before it reaches the part that sends the tweet out, the Mastodon message out. And the cool thing about this is you don't have to actually code for this. You could reuse the pull tweet and send tweet method, and you may use your own MyMap usernames, or you use somebody else's who created a filter that you can just reuse. But think about it. Maybe you want to code it. Maybe you want to make it fully customizable, but you actually don't know any JavaScript. And the pull tweet function is written in JavaScript, but you only know, say, Grain or Rust. And so you can write your MyMap usernames function in Rust or Grain and compile it, and like Subo will just take care of the rest. Like your tweet will be transformed by your own function written in the language you actually understand, and you don't actually have to worry about what language all the rest of the stuff is written in, as long as it works, of course. And there's another really interesting thing here, which is schedules, which is indispensable to be able to write this application, which means that you call these functions after deploying. You basically call this function using the pull endpoint. What you can also tell Suborbital is to have a schedule, and on every minute, it actually will do this for you. And so I can show you at least that part. So here I'm in the application directory. I'm going to execute sudo build. And in the top, you see that the application is being built. There is like some build comments executed, and the compilation is successful. And so what we are going to do is sudo dev, which is going to oh, I have it running here. That's the problem. Sudo dev. Right. And so what you see here is that there's some log messages. The first one is like, oh, we failed to get the last tweet from the cache. So we attempt to pull all the latest tweets. And so this is an expected error. What is not expected is this unauthorized error here, which I have not been able to figure out. But at the other end of this, like this will pull in like a tweet and send it out on the other side. What you will see here, though, is that if I talk long enough, like the 1 minute will expire, and you will see this function called again, and it will fail again, unfortunately. But like what happens here is basically super like Atmo here is running a full server, and Atmo here pulls from the directive file this ability that this directive to call this function every 1 minute. And oh, there it goes. Yeah, so this is the second call. And so Suborbital can be configured to execute these functions on a schedule, which again is really useful because Twitter has some really weird ideas about like streaming tweets as they come in. So are actually like one of the easiest ways to do a cross poster like this is actually if we pull for new tweets like on like a schedule of like every 1 minute, which is fine for like a Twitter application like this. Like for more complex applications, you might want to skip this. But like before I completely so before I completely ruined the current version of the application or whatever the Twitter API did. I'll update you on what went wrong here after I managed to figure out what went wrong in here. You can see like here on the Mastodon social account, there is this test account that I've been using that has been cross-posting various tweets onto the account and has been like doing a pretty good job, I would say. Like you could see like some of the usernames need to be like translated, but here when I click to, for example, Ramon's username, it should direct us to the correct instance. And there are still some things to be done. For example, like media, images, and videos, you can totally cross-post, but like you need to like do some more legwork to get that working on the API side of things. And of course, like this, the plan is to make this like fully modular and pluggable. So eventually this could work for everyone. We actually have a write-up about this and deploying, yeah, because I bet you already started thinking like, okay, Flocky, but like it sounds really like you I would need to run a server like Atmo to do this cross posting for me. Where can I do that? And we actually are working on a tutorial series, potentially series, that is going to tell you exactly that. That is going to show you how can you build an application like this or use the version that we are going to open source hopefully soon, and show you how to deploy it and use it to cross-post your own tweets into Mastodon if that's something that you would like to do. So yeah, like looking forward to fixing this. Hope to be able to open source this soon as well. And please, yeah, if you have any questions, like super happy to hear them.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for sharing, Flocky. This is it's interesting to see how much goes into, I mean, it doesn't sound like much, but yeah, it's kind of like, you're essentially moving content from one platform to another, which is
Oh yeah.
a big thing.
Oh wait, like let me. I was like, maybe I have an older version that I can actually show you what it does when it actually works. From the logs at least. I mean, oh, there it is. Yeah. Oh yeah. Look at it. Can you see? I haven't. If you can still see it, it's just a bunch of logs, but you can see here JSON from an incoming message,
Look at that.
and then it gets tweeted out somewhere in the end, and we have a. Wait, where is it? So, oh yeah, that's a no new tweets. So the last response should have a Mastodon link that this got tweeted out to. Was in Chicago. Where's the Mastodon link though? Da-da-da-da. Anyway, yeah, you get the idea. Yeah, I will. But
All
yeah,
good.
that's basically.
No, thank you very much. This is super cool. I'm super excited to see where it goes. And folks, please, if you've got any questions, comments, any experiences with this kind of project, please do drop those into the chat. I will say thank you very much, Flacky. Um,
Thank you.
yeah, see you next time. All right, we are approaching the end of our community meetup for today. One last thing I wanted to give a brief shout out to before I let you all go for the day is a reminder that last week we held the Wasm Builders meetup, and we had the joy of bringing on Brian Sletton to talk, amongst other things, about his book, WebAssembly: The Definitive Guide. I don't know why it just disappeared from my head for a second. um, yeah, and it was a fun conversation. I'm biased because I helped hold it, but there's a link if you all want to catch up. I did the courtesy of jumping with the timestamp ahead of the little intro time, and yeah, thank you all so much. Feel free to stick around for conversations. Feel free to open any issues you might have with anything. If you see an issue you want to contribute to, please feel free to as well. And yeah, any questions, we're here. Thanks a lot, and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye now.